Super Bowl 56, a back-and-forth game between the Cincinnati Bengals and LA Rams, came down to one final drive. With 43 seconds on the game clock and the Rams clinging to a 3-point lead, Cincinnati faced 4th down and 1 in Rams territory. And as Rams head coach Sean McVay looked out at his defense lining up for the biggest play of his coaching career, he said,
"Aaron Donald's going to make a play."
And that's exactly what happened. Pre-snap, Donald lined up in the 4 technique opposite the left tackle, and he attacked the left guard's outside shoulder to avoid a possible double team coming from the inside. As Joe Burrow dropped back to pass, Bengals left guard Quinton Spain threw a punch at Donald's chest to initiate contact, which Donald neutralized with a cross chop. That move gave Donald the outside lane, and he bent into the pocket to get his hands on Joe Burrow. As Donald brought him to the ground, Burrow let go of the ball out of desperation, and when his pass hit the turf, the Rams became Super Bowl champions. Coach McVay's prediction that Donald would be the one to end this game wasn't some lucky guess. By this point, Donald had spent his entire 8-year career demolishing opposing offensive linemen and terrorizing the league's best quarterbacks, and he continued to do so for 2 more years before announcing his retirement following last season. In his 10 years as a pro, Donald made the Pro Bowl 10 times, was a first-team All-Pro selection 8 times, and won the Defensive Player of the Year award 3 times. But despite the insanity of those accolades, Donald's resume doesn't paint a full picture of how good he truly was. Traditionally, sacks are used as the standard of evaluation for defensive linemen, and with 110 career sacks, Donald does rank first among all players who entered the league in 2014 or later. But a pass rusher's sack total doesn't account for the variables outside of his control that played a role in those sacks. Today, most evaluators put more stock into stats that isolate the matchup between the pass rusher and the pass protector, which is why stats like pressures and pass rush win rate have become much more popular over the past few years. No stat is perfect, but these provide a much more accurate representation of the player's performance and are much more predictive over time than volatile stats such as sacks. So with that in mind, in terms of pressures and pass rush win rate, Donald has been at or near the top of the league since his breakout in 2015. His pass rush win rate hovered around 20%, which was usually good for top 5 in the league, and he's consistently put up around 80 pressures a year, with the exception of 2022 when he missed 6 games due to injury. Now, when evaluating defensive linemen, there is a very important distinction that needs to be made. D linemen can be divided into 2 broad categories based on where they line up relative to the center. Guys who line up in between the tackles are known as interior defensive linemen or defensive tackles, whereas guys who line up outside of the tackles are known as edge rushers or defensive ends. Donald falls into the former category, and this positional distinction is important to acknowledge, because rushing the passer from the inside and outside are 2 fundamentally different assignments. Getting to the quarterback consistently from the inside is more difficult than doing so from the outside, because guys who line up inside are subjected to far more double teams than guys who line up outside. Double team data isn't available to the public, but Seth Walder, who's an analytics writer for ESPN, often posts graphs like this one from 2021 that plot double team rate against pass rush win rate, and these provide a great visual for why edge rushers and interior defensive linemen should not be grouped into the same category. As you can see, guys like Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, and Robert Quinn had win rates of over 25%, but they also had double team rates of under 30%. That's because every name you see on the left side of this graph belongs to a player who primarily lined up on the outside, whereas the names on the right belong to guys who primarily lined up on the inside. Even though it's from a couple years ago, I always come back to this graph, because it's one of the few visuals that accurately represent how unreal Donald was. When he's compared to other guys who actually played his position, he's in a league of his own. Since Donald broke out in 2015, an interior defensive lineman has totaled at least 80 pressures in a regular season 9 times. 6 of those 9 80 pressure seasons belong to Donald. Since Pro Football Focus started tracking pass rush win rate in 2006, Donald is the only interior defensive lineman who's eclipsed a win rate of 20% in a single season. And he did it 6 times in 10 years, including this past season. Make no mistake, if Donald decided to come back, he would once again be the best defensive lineman in football. There was no regression, so you don't need to dive deep to find some of the best defensive line tape out there. This play from LA's Week 4 game against Indianapolis is one of my favorites from last season. Donald is lined up opposite the left shoulder of the center as a 1 technique nose tackle, and the offense is running wide zone action. So to sell the run fake, each offensive lineman will take a play side step post-snap. Donald is so quick to recognize the footwork from the center, and that quickness allows him to strike and shed before the quarterback even reaches the mesh point. After the play fake, help came from the strong side. So the right guard was there to seal Donald outside, but he threw multiple swipes to stay free and bent to the quarterback for a sack. Pass rushers usually attempt one move, and when it fails, they rely on their motor to generate pressure. But Donald was always on the attack, often transitioning from one move to the next without skipping a beat, which was necessary in beating the double teams he so frequently faced. The offense had to sell out to contain him every game, because if he was left one-on-one, he'd take over. And that created opportunities for the rest of LA's defensive linemen. On this play from the first quarter of Super Bowl 56, Donald is lined up on the left side of your screen opposite the inside shoulder of the right tackle. Cincinnati made a half-slide protection call in Donald's direction, which tells the center to slide with the right guard and right tackle, while the left guard and left tackle block the man opposite them. Being able to dictate which way the offensive line slides is so valuable, because the man side of the half-slide call is much more susceptible to stunts and delayed blitzes than the slide side. So here, knowing that the slide is going in Donald's direction, LA runs an ET stunt to the other side. Von Miller takes the inside path as the penetrator, which forces Joe Burrow off his spot, and Greg Gaines loops right into Burrow's face. The pressure led to an overthrow, and the Bengals would punt on the following fourth down. The Rams would also generate one-on-ones for Donald by crowding the line of scrimmage, like they did on this third down. LA walked a linebacker up over the center, which prompted a 5-0 protection call from the offense. That gave Donald a one-on-one matchup with the right guard, and his nasty bull rush got him a sack before the downfield route concept could develop. Donald was a problem as a pass rusher despite being subjected to so many double teams, which might make you wonder why the Rams didn't just let him rush from the outside to avoid those double teams, and sometimes they did. On this play from LA's game against Dallas in Week 5 of the 2022 season, Donald lined up in a wide 9 technique outside the tight end on the left side of your screen, and he beat Cowboys left tackle Tyler Smith with pure speed and bend. Donald could have rushed from the edge exclusively, but the reason why it would have been counterproductive to move him there is because of how good he was against the run from the inside. At 6'1", 280, Donald was undersized for the interior, which was a cause for concern in the draft process. Every scouting report you can find from back in 2014 will list his size as a weakness, and will question his ability to hold up against the run. But his physical gifts and refined technique made him one of the best run defenders in the league year after year. The sideline angle of this play from back in 2022 against San Francisco is just nuts. Look at where Donald is after his first step. He's resetting the line of scrimmage before any of the other defensive linemen are even engaged with the opposing blockers. At the mesh point, Donald is a full 2 yards in the backfield, and that forces Christian McCaffrey to cut early. After he cuts, Donald crosses the center's face and holds the run to a loss of a yard. The displacement he created against single blocks like this allowed him to blow up run plays routinely, and double teams rarely slowed him down either. Here in the divisional round of the 2021 playoffs, Tampa Bay is running split zone, which tells the left guard and left tackle to double Donald and work up to the second level. Post-snap, the guard takes a play side step, and Donald mirrors it to take on one block at a time. Donald's effort to engage with one blocker rather than two minimizes the left tackle's effort to generate displacement, and puts all of the knockback power on the left guard. Donald turns the guard's hips to hold the line of scrimmage, then gets skinny in between the double team block to meet the running back in the backfield. As fans, we throw the term generational around way too often, but sometimes its use is justifiable. Other times, like in Donald's case, it's irrefutable. He was the best defensive player in football every year for nearly a decade. Offensive play callers structured their game plans around him, and he still consistently found ways to dominate. But more importantly, he left his mark on the game, redefining what an undersized defensive tackle can be. His retirement serves as a reminder to appreciate greatness while we can, because there will never be another Aaron Donald.